What is up, ninjas? My name is SamWorld, and today we're going to be going over 5 reasons why your mixdown doesn't sound tight. Now, I remember when I was a little bit younger, I actually Googled this, and I tried to do a bit of research for this video as well, and I couldn't find any video or article out there talking about how to get a tight mixdown. There was videos on thin, why your mixes sound thin and whatnot, but I never found one for tight mixdowns. Now, I know I'm not the only one that thinks this way, because I have seen on forums that people ask, why doesn't my mix sound tight? How to get that tight mix? And a lot of the answers they were given was compression and whatnot, which I do agree with, but then there were some other questionable answers as well. Now, when it comes to the definition of a tight mixdown, guys, to me, it sounds something like an Amazon package that has been well packed. You shake it, you don't hear anything dangling in there because the guy that shipped it to you packaged it pretty well. And it kind of, you get some other packages where it sounds like all over the place. You're like, I think this thing broke, dude. Similar to that in music, I have heard certain songs where it sounds kind of loose, but then there's certain songs where that tight mix down, the drums just sound perfectly there, compressed, well, clean, hitting in the right spots. So today we're going to be talking about that. A good song example from me to you will probably be Actual's Nobody Else. That track is just so well produced, so well mixed, that essentially it's going to be my reference for a tight mix down. I do want you guys to let me know down in the comments below, however, what a tight mixdown means to you. Do you think it exists? Is it Fugazi? What's a song that you think has a really tight mix? Let me know in the comments down below, guys. And as always, if you want to support my channel, make sure to head over to evilsounds.com. A lot of the sounds in the song you're about to hear as an example do come from a new pack on there called Exploration, so make sure to check it out. Best way to support my channel. And let's get straight into this video. All right, so for the first example, we're going to just check this out real fast. Now, all the exact changes I needed to make are here, and then we're going to talk a little bit about how you can go about in controlling your low end a bit better. All right, so the first thing, like I was talking about, a lot of people will make sounds or make presets where they want sort of like a wide bass line, and this is a perfect example of that. So whenever you have more than one voice in Serum and you start to detune, essentially you're panning left and right and detuning, as you can see. On even numbers, you're panning them all. On odd numbers, you're going to have one in the center, while the other 4, let's say we're at 5, the other 4 are going to get detuned and put a little bit more to the side. As you can see, we still have that center one there. Okay, so if we do this, it's totally fine, but the problem happens is that first off, your low end is going to sound weird. So if I bring this back up, our low end from here, and I get rid of all of this, this is my low end response from that Reese. And it's not bad, but the problem with it is that it's not providing enough constant sub power to essentially drive my track forward. So the first thing I can do is I can just get rid of all the frequencies I had here. And just cut everything below 86. For this bass, it's going to be that. You can do 100, whatever you feel fits, but you got to cut the lows off, and then you're going to put a dedicated sub that will provide constant low end for that bass. So it doesn't sound like the low end, the sub doesn't, that's the first thing. So in this scenario, that's what happened with us. In another scenario, let's say you don't do that and you don't detune heavily, you're not doing this kind of bass. When you do that, you're going to get a stereo response from the bass. So I'm going to get rid of all the stuff I've implemented to essentially prevent the low end from essentially getting wide in certain spots. So we should be fine there. And you're going to get a stereo response. Okay, now my problem is that when you hear the stereo signal, you can hear those frequencies there. I personally do not like that in the stereo signal. I feel like that should be mono, so I cut it out. So it's only in the center. And it's going to give me a tighter response. Anything that sounds in mono is instantly going to sound tighter. I'm still allowing the bass to have a bit of width, anything above that 200 hertz range. But essentially, I'm controlling it because, again, to me, it just sounds too loose and too yaw. I was recently watching an actual tutorial where he did the exact same thing. He just doesn't like his those frequencies being in the stereo field, and I'm a huge fan of that. I did it beforehand, but when I saw he did it, I was like, my man. All right, so those are some things we can do to just control the sub, taming the sub. The last thing, of course, is going to be to just provide a little bit of compression on the sub to provide constant flow on it. This is just going to be done with some compressors and also a bit of saturation. So it's giving us a bit more mid-lows in essence, and that's going to be the trick there. Now, the other thing I get from separating the sub is I can sidechain the crap out of it, and then I can make the top bass a little bit more apparent and not as sidechain, utilizing a compressor instead of an LFO tool to do the automation where I'm cutting fully all the way. But with those things, that should help me control the low end of my track. Those things are crucial in just getting it to sound tight, because now if we just hear the low end, I will get a tight response out of it and it won't sound loosey-goosey. Now, if I get rid of all those things that I've done, this is how it's going to sound like. When I put this on, you get sort of like a lift in the stereo signal. So I really liked what I did there, and I feel like that's one of the things you do need. You need to have a bit of control of your low end to get a tight mix. Compression is going to play a huge vital role in just getting your track to sound a little bit tighter, due to the fact that it's going to start to clamp down whenever the threshold is activated. Now, a lot of the times you're going to find it's going to be your kick, your clap, little loud fills, little effects that trigger it. A lot of times when we do a leveling job, we might not get it exactly leveled. So that's where the compressor is going to come into play to just get everything to sound tight, and let's just call it packaging a box properly. So the way it's going to work, guys, here, I'm going to show you guys in the master compressor with and without, as that's the easiest way to show this example. So here it is without compression. Now, when I put the compressor on, what I want you to hear out for is going to be the open hat coming more to the front of the mix. A lot of the stereo elements getting a little bit more forward. The kick, the way it sounds, a little bit more composed, as well as the low end. Check it out. Okay, so you can probably hear that. Now, that's what's going to help in creating a tight mix, is when you have compression. You can definitely start to compress individual elements, but without compression, a lot of tracks would sound kind of just not tight at all, a little bit loose, just because everything's going to be dynamically all over the place. So compression is kind of meant to be kind of like the manager trying to get everyone to just essentially be in the right place dynamically. Okay, now with compression, obviously, if you overdo it, you can get anything that sounds loose to sound hella tight, but that's not the point. Okay, and anything's going to sound tight when you compress it that much, but that should kind of give you an idea of what it's doing, and you should find a little balance. When in doubt, don't over compress, under compress, but you want to find a little balance in between until you get your desired effect. Now, with a compressor, what essentially you're going to be doing is messing around with the threshold until you have the needle moving a bit. From there, you're going to start to dial in your attack and release settings if you want to preserve transients, and obviously go with a higher attack. If you want to squash transients, when some tracks do that, you can go with 0.1 millisecond attack where it's instant. Okay, if you want the compressor to pump, then you're going to go with very low attack and very low release, so you get a very fast movement. I don't recommend this setting, but you will hear it start moving up and down really fast. Due to the volume fluctuations, you're going to hear a pump. Compressors are going to be a great way to, like I said, add movement, but you do want to control them. You don't want them to control you, similar to the low end. So usually I find these settings, like punch settings, work for only certain tracks. A lot of times you want to be very gentle. Release at auto, set your attack from there until you get a compression that you are happy with. The idea is to just get that tight mix feel to the track, not to squash the shit out of it, as that's something I hear a lot of people do as well. Now, having a buildup of frequency in a certain spot is something that you shouldn't want in your track, as it's going to make it sound flat more than tight. So I'm going to show you guys an example here. Around 250 usually is where a lot of people say stuff starts to get muddy, especially that frequency. I had a mentor that would tell me always to reduce there no matter what on the master channel. And in all honesty, it works for certain songs if you have too much mid-lows, and it doesn't work for certain songs if you have too little of it. Obviously, you're just making the problem worse then. However, if you look at this, notice how it sort of makes way for the rest of the mix to just sound a little bit cleaner. So a buildup of frequency can usually be seen just in span, because you're going to kind of see something doesn't seem right. So you can kind of see this guy pops out like a sore thumb. You can tell it's just giving me the finger. So obviously if someone gives me the finger, they will get annihilated. But no, we're going to clamp down on that area. And you can see you get a better, cleaner response. There's going to be just frequencies that bundle up like that, just sound really bad. On that one, I tried my best to get that lead to not have it, but the more I reduced, thinner it sounded. And once we did it on the master, it actually sounded pretty good. It didn't really clamp down on it that much. But it could also be that there was other elements in the track which was just adding to the problem. So make sure you don't have too much of a certain frequency, as that can also cause your mix not to sound tight due to it just making it sound a little bit more flat. Now, when it comes to sound selection, the biggest culprit is usually going to be the type of kick people use in their tracks. A lot of times you got to really look for the right kick for your track, and sometimes it can be like a burden because you can't find it. The best kick I could find for this track was going to be the one I'm utilizing but having the wrong kick can alter the mix heavily. For instance, here I'm going to have a couple of kicks we're going to audition with the song. They're going to be labeled the same as kick G looped, but this is how it's going to sound. You can see it kind of just doesn't fit. It's like it wants to fit. It's trying to be cool like everyone else, but it just doesn't fit. And it gets even worse if you start to pick kicks that are just really out there, for instance. It just doesn't feel right. This one just has a way better response. And the idea is that it's just too clicky. Some of these kicks are just going to be too clicky. So you really have to pay attention to what kind of kick you want to utilize in your track. This one's not that bad and can actually work in it if we put a little bit of work to just get it to fit. But I still like the way this one just sounds very grungy, kind of cardboard boxy in a way, but it still just holds up pretty well in the track. So the last example, guys, is going to be on leveling. Now, I have yet to mix properly this part of the track. It's almost where I want it to be, but we can still use it as a good example on how leveling could ruin a mix. And then I'll show you guys some cool tricks that you can use to level your mix. So here we're going to have this part of the song. Okay, now I probably need to level a couple of things in this track a little better, like the lead probably needs to get toned down a little bit and all that. But let's assume that we have a tight mix, okay? So one of the things that I see a lot is sometimes people tend to have too many elements be loud. So what I mean by this is here we have this ARP. Now, obviously, the ARP is not the center of attention in this track, so we don't want it to overtake the lead. But a problem I would see is this would be almost as loud as the lead, and it would create a mess, and it would sound not tight just because the levels aren't going to be exactly where they need to be. Okay, that would be a perfect example. Another thing is the drums. Obviously, if your drums are too quiet, That will kind of ruin just the whole tightness of the track, as the drums are too quiet, and then you have a big separation between the volume of the lead and the drums. Essentially, the drums need to be at least close to where the lead is, where there's going to be kind of like a perfect balance between them. So that's another thing that leveling is going to play a huge role in just getting your track to sound a little tighter. So how can we go about leveling? Well, there's a couple of techniques I can show you really fast. The first one, when you're starting a song, is that you can anchor the kick. So essentially, you're going to be leveling the kick to -6, and I can always say you should always be doing this. You can level the kick at -12. I don't like to level the kick at 0, just because if you want to make something a little louder, or you need to go a little louder to reach the loudness of the kick, or where it's going to fit with the kick, you might have to go a bit above, and then it starts to look a little messy. Now, putting the kick at -6, you're going to start to essentially level everything around the kick. So let's say you have a sub bass in the track, and we'll use this as an example here. Let's pull these. Nothing is going to be louder than the kick, and then you can start to level around that. Okay, so then from there you would do the lead and vice versa. Now with this, you have to use your ears, but let's assume, is there another way? Well, another thing I like to do is I like to tell people to use span. Now this isn't going to guarantee a 100% that the bass is leveled, but it should give you sort of like a guideline and sort of like something to aim for. When your track is fully mastered and loud, one of the things that I always see in most people's tracks is that the bass always hits that -30 mark, and it revolves around it. It can go a little bit above it, and it can go a little bit below it, but usually most of the time it's there, and then you're going to have your mid somewhere here, your highs here, and your mid-lows will sometimes be a little bit more ducked. So if we do use this as sort of a guideline, as you can see, if I go over here, that's just too much low end. So if I bring it back down, and around perfect, maybe a little bit more. Now, another thing, and let's let that white noise go out. Another thing is you can also target your high frequencies. Obviously, we're going to have our drums like open hats and closed hats, which are going to take a bunch of those high frequencies. That's majority of the time when you see high-end information there, it's going to be provided by rides, open hats, stuff like that, unless you have like a super screechy, loud, high-frequency bass lead. But if we solo them, you can see that's going to be coming from our hats. So if I go in, so with that, you can kind of use it to level. A lot of the times the hats are going to be a little bit quieter than the lead, but not as loud as the lead. So a little bit below it. You definitely want it to be around there. Now keep in mind, again, these are just guidelines. It doesn't mean that only the hats will provide high frequencies. It just means that a lot of the times they play a huge role in how loud the highs are going to be getting. You can also look at effects like essentially that white noise that we had, and we can see what it does to essentially our frequency spectrum here. So if we look at that, you can see that's the white noise right there interacting. So a lot of the times, you know, you have your effects way too loud. They're going to be all up here, and you can always tone them down a bit. For instance, that noise could be just a tad bit quieter, and when we level it, okay. So those are some cool ways to level, guys. Again, using your ears is the biggest thing, but you do have access to Span, which is a free spectrum analyzer, and you're gonna have access to other things that you can utilize. Definitely watch tutorials out there on gain staging and leveling. If you're still having issues with that, I'll try and make a video in the future specifically on that, but this is gonna be one of the things that holds your track back in terms of tightness. Obviously, if you have effects going really loud and then the whole track is quiet, then that's gonna play a big role. Finding a balance on that can sometimes be difficult, but again, use your ears, feel it, and once you get it where you need to, you will see that your track will get a lot tighter. So those are going to be my 5 reasons why your mix sound just doesn't sound tight. 1, you're letting the low end control you. You're not controlling it. A tight low end will usually sound better in mono than in stereo. The second thing, your levels are off. That can ruin, again, a mix sound because we are going for that perfect tight mix. So everything needs to be balanced dynamically. Number 3, with the tight mix sound without tight compression. 4, you have too much buildup in a certain frequency, which kills the tightness. So make sure you are looking out for that. And finally, guys, 5, wrong selection of sound. So majority of the time, I'm going to find it's the kick and the bass that aren't getting along. Sometimes you mix it well, but it's just the kick doesn't work with that kind of track you have. So it's always good to kind of put in a little bit of time to find the perfect kick. Sample kicks, whatever works for you. And with that being said, guys, that is going to be the end of the video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. And as always, you want to support my channel, evilsounds.com. I'll catch you guys next time. You guys take care.